Hello, and thank you for joining us for Police Magazine's Coffee with Police Experts, the 2022 ILEDA series. I'm Doug Wyllie. I'm here with Bobby Cummings. You're with Clark Nexsen.
Yes, sir.
And you're essentially an architectural firm, a design firm, and you folks create facilities for law enforcement training.
That's correct.
It's fascinating to me because there are many places in which many of our trainers have gone, and they'll overtake a gymnasium, or they'll retrofit a building, or in many cases it'll be an old derelict school,
Sure.
or what have you. You guys are different in that you design these facilities from the ground up.
Correct.
Can you tell me a little about the philosophy behind that, Bobby?
Well, sure, and I think you hit on a great point, Doug. I mean, for years and years, law enforcement has had to really make do with whatever facilities they could find to be able to train in. So our firm specializes in developing new facilities for these agencies to be able to use. And with funding available today, these agencies can have up-to-date modern facilities to use. So we look at the training that is needed for the law enforcement officers and adapt the facilities specifically to that training. It's really the reverse of what they had to do before. Find a facility and make the training work. We make the facility work for their training.
So you take an agency, no matter what size. So, for example, 10 to 20, or
Sure.
100 to 200, or in the thousands,
Absolutely.
and you take their training needs. Essentially do a needs assessment, right?
Absolutely.
This is what we want to achieve according to what our objectives are. And then you design the facility, and so I would imagine you work directly and closely with the trainers themselves. Is that right?
We do. In fact, quite often our very first contact is with the trainers. We meet them at conferences like this, or
Yep.
maybe at their local place of work. So that's usually our first contact. And again, it is very scalable, whether it's a very small agency or a very large, because everybody needs the same type of training. It doesn't matter the size of their agency. And so we do work with them. You actually hit on a term that we use a lot, a feasibility study.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where we start. We have to come in and do a needs assessment to see what they need, how they train, so that we can start to develop those facility ideas for them.
So, and we've talked as law enforcement trainers about things, and I've shunned this term, the continuum, right? I like things more along the lines of the menu or the spectrum.
Sure.
You have, command presence, you have the ability to use your verbal skills and your communications skills, and then you have all the way through to use of deadly force,
Sure.
less lethal and what have you. Your facilities, you have to incorporate all different types of training. So you would have classrooms, mat rooms, and say, for example, maybe simulator rooms, yes?
Absolutely. And, for those of us who've been in the business a long time, and I'm a law enforcement officer from way back, and that's where my background is in that. And so things like the continuum that you said, is something that we remember from our academy days. But in today's world, you're exactly right. It has to be more fluid, and we have to be able to choose at a moment's notice what our response is going to be. So in these facilities, we've developed something we call the training triangle that actually deals with what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
A complete use of force facility must have an area like a classroom where you can sit and talk about policy, talk about what might happen, how you would deal with situations. It must have an area like a live fire facility where you can employ the tools, learn the manual alarms, learn how to manipulate the tools that you have in a safe environment. But that simulated environment is equally important. That's that third point of the triangle. And this is where, and it doesn't have to be a simulator, it needs to be a simulated environment. And there's multiple ways to do that. But in that environment, that's where decision making and judgment happens, where you can employ all of the things that you learn.
And what are your folks at Clark Nexsen hearing back from agencies that have been using facilities you folks have designed, and what is essentially the customer feedback? What are you learning from people who are using your facilities, and where are you going forward?
Well, what we're hearing back is that we're spot on with the way that we're designing these facilities. They're getting exactly what they need, and they're able to conduct the type of training that they need for the area that they're in. And you have to realize that not every agency has the same issues and the same types of things to deal with. Mm-hmm. And so again, it has to be very specific to that agency. It also is important that the facility is scalable and adaptable as things change over time. So we're hearing that our facilities are working for them, and it's working well.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a lot from different places. different agencies they're beginning to look at regional solutions,
Yes.
and different
Yeah.
agencies are coming together in cooperation. So you'll have,
Absolutely.
say, for example, a sheriff's agency incorporated with 2 or 3 municipal agencies
Yes.
together. So you've got police leaders and funding, and so you're kind of herding a whole bunch of different
Oh, absolutely.
entities at the same time into underneath, quote unquote, under one roof.
Absolutely, and so now we are even going away from the term of use of force training facilities to public safety training facilities, because we are trying to combine multiple agencies, not only regionally in law enforcement, but also fire and EMS.
Yeah, and multidisciplinary, of course.
Exactly, and that's so important because they can pull the funding, they get greater response from the community that's willing to provide this as well, and it gives them a lot more strength in numbers to be able to do that. So that's extraordinarily important.
And given the fact that you have an all threats or an all hazards type of an approach to a lot of different training, that makes a lot of sense. I call it the y'all come.
Sure.
When it's
Yeah.
the school shooting or a mall shooting, or everybody's going to arrive at the scene. You're going to have
That's correct.
EMS, you're going to have fire, you're going to have in some cases of, say, for example, a public disaster,
Right.
A natural disaster. You're going to have public works, you're going to have water, you're going to have electrical companies.
Sure.
Everybody's going to come. Y'all come.
Right.
And so you're going to have a facility that can simulate that type of an event,
Sure.
and in a safe environment, in a way that's controllable, and also in a way where you're going to have the ability to observe,
Right.
and then do the teaching and the instruction before, during, and then thereafter doing a debrief. Is that
Sure. Absolutely, and I really think you nailed that again with the multiple numbers of agencies and people that are going to converge on the scene when anything happens. And we do take that into account, and as we're designing these facilities, we want all of these stakeholders at the table so that we can work through those issues at the same time. We recently had one of our clients who has a facility that we designed that was originally developed only as a law enforcement facility.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's scalable, because it's adaptable, they recently took an event like a NASCAR race in this particular locality, and they simulated a crash inside, now not the actual crash itself, but simulated the conditions in the facility, and all of these agencies were able to converge and train together because this facility is so scalable and adaptable.
It's fascinating. You guys take a really interesting approach. I really appreciate the folks that are working with Clark Nexsen, yourself as well, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Doug Wyllie for Police Magazine. Click again for another example of this type of expertise for Coffee with Police Experts.